Hello and welcome to the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things. Recorded live at the 18th Annual Florida Writers Conference. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast. Today I am lucky enough to have with me Janice Heck. Janice, why don't you give me a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
All right, 60 seconds. Well, I'm Janice Heck. I'm a former educator. I was a teacher of children with special needs for about 20 years, and then I moved into administration. I was an elementary principal in Alaska and then at Hong Kong International School. After that, I retired in about 2000, came home to the States, and got back into my writing interests and joined some writers groups, and did that over the years. A couple of years ago, 4 years ago, as a matter of fact, a friend and I started our own writers critique group because we wanted a group that would give supportive suggestions, not just, oh, I like your writing, it's nice writing, these are nice words. We wanted constructive, supportive criticism on how to improve your writing. And so we started our group in a church in Millville, New Jersey. And at one of our early meetings, a man named Bob Osler came. And he was a chaplain. He was actually the assistant pastor at the church. And as we went around the circle talking about what do you write, he started talking about his experiences at Ground Zero after September 11th. And we were all just in awe. Tell us more. And it was like, you have to write that book. He says, I can't. I get too emotional. I've tried to write. Every time I try to write, I get depressed. I get upset. I can't do it. So we try to say, okay, this group will help you. That's our purpose here, to help other writers. And so he tried, but he couldn't come across with any writing. So I suggested to him that he email me stories, his memories or experiences there. And so he did. He sent me about 100 emails in about 30 days, just detailed, somewhere like 5 pages long with no paragraphs and no sentence structure, but all the gist of all these ideas, sometimes random, sometimes it was, started calling them brain dumps. Whatever he was thinking about, he would start talking about and then send to me. And there was so much material there. And I started organizing it, cutting and pasting it, categorizing it, shifting it around. And then we started meeting every week. And we met every week for, a good 3 or 4 months. Just talked about his experiences. And sometimes he had given me gists of stories, and I wanted to know more. Tell me more. Tell me the details. Tell me what street it was on and where you stayed and what kind, some descriptive detail. What did it sound like? What did it smell like on the pile when you were working there? What other things did you see? How did you react? What were your emotional reactions? And so actually it was pretty intense for him. And at times it was pretty emotional because it would just bring back all of these memories. But we worked through it and pulled together the roughest first draft in history. And then we went to a writers' conference, and it happened to be in Philadelphia, near Philadelphia, Greater Philadelphia Christian Writers Conference, which Marlene Bagnall runs every year. And there we met a lot of editors and publishers, and a lot were interested. They liked the idea, loved the idea, but this is not my genre, they would say. We don't publish that kind of book. But we did meet one publisher named Scotty Domay of Blackside Publishing, and she publishes military and patriotic books. And so this was right perfect in her lineup. So she took our book and we worked together on it, back and forth, editing, revising, changing, suggestions she made. And we ended up with this book, Triumph Over Terror, by Ground Zero chaplain Bob Osler with Janice Hall Heck. So we're very proud of that book. We did win a few awards, and the Best Book Awards finalist and an International Book Awards finalist. So that's doing well. And every September, this has a bounce on Amazon. So we're happy about that. And in, next week, Bob is speaking in Tulsa for an organization. They're doing emergency service workers, pulling them all together, and Bob is speaking to them. So they just bought a bunch of these books too, so we're happy about that. But then in the process of working with Bob on the first book, I realized that he was having some trouble with writing and organization of ideas and that kind of thing. I realized that he had ADHD, although he was not diagnosed as ADHD, but he had heard Dr. Hollowell speak on the radio in 1995, as he was going home from work one day. And Dr. Hollowell was explaining about ADHD, and that was when it was like first becoming known. Bob listened to everything he said and was like, oh my gosh, he's talking about me. And how did he know these things about me? And, the poor achievement in school and the attention and the daydreaming and the wandering and the extra fidgeting activity and that kind of thing. And that was his first inkling of that he had ADHD, but he didn't really pursue it then. Later on, he did pursue it, and as an adult, he was diagnosed as ADHD. But anyway, we got together on this and decided to write a book about how he coped, because he's been a fireman, a firefighter in Chicago, a paramedic, a chaplain, ordained pastor. He's been a mortician, a funeral director. And as ADHD people do, they change jobs a lot, or they keep looking for one more thing to do. And he was always striving to do the next best thing, to earn more money for one reason, but also his just that nature, he wanted to learn more. But he also had difficulty in any learning situation, and so he had to learn to adapt everything that he did. And so he tells some of those stories about how he got into trouble in school, how he even got into trouble when he was in the military, how he got into trouble when he was in seminary because they thought he was cheating. But he fortunately has an exceptional memory. That was one of the special skills he does have. And that memory helped him get through things. But writing and essay writing, report writing, and multiple choice tests, he had a hard time with all of those. But he learned to adapt. He learned to speak to his professors about his learning difficulties and how they could help him. And he had a special mentor in college and seminary that understood his problems and just worked with him. And it took him 17 years to pursue his goal of becoming a chaplain and a pastor. But he did it, and he did it because of persistence, determination. He had special mentors along the way that helped him out. His wife, always there supporting him, helping him, doing whatever. And even his kids helped him out with one of his daughters edited some of his papers for school. So he found ways to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. And now he's a senior citizen and retired and doing well in life. And now speaking around the country at different venues for emergency service workers and group churches sometimes and whatever. So anyway, that's the story of that book.
What an interesting collaboration you've been able to create with Bob.
Right.
I want to go back to something you had said in the very beginning about him sending you emails, and they'd be 5 pages of a brain dump. I totally understand that. I want to know how you organize that. You said you started to organize it and file it. Did you use a program? Did you just label them, put them in Word files?
Right. I cut, and sometimes I print it out, and then I just drew boxes around, or I highlighted certain topics, and I could see he repeated things. And then I started grouping those repetitions. And after a while, it kind of fell into categories of, this was actual experience on the pile. These are experiences with the firefighters who were having emotional difficulties. And these were experiences with families of the victims. And so I was able to group like that. And then, of course, there was a sequential thing, too. So when he first got there, at different points, going back and forth, because he was traveling from Chicago to New York, did it over 3 or 4 months, and he went 5 times for 5 different tours of duties. So, but anyway, that's kind of what I did. So I would cut and paste them on the paper, and then I'd do the same thing on Word files, and then I'd categorize, and I started getting a tentative outline, and then I would chunk those pieces into that outline. And that's basically how we did it. And then we met, and sometimes he was just short on details. And so I'd say, okay, what was that person's name? Or what was that person's job? Or, you know how they say, name the dog. It's getting details in the story. That's one of not Peter, I can't remember now. But one piece of advice is to give the details. And I wanted to know more about the sights and the sounds and the smells, because the smells, as he started talking about them, just brought back incredible memories to him. And then he talked about some of his rescue experiences. So it just kind of fell into place after a while. You just cut and paste and organize, and it turned out to be a fairly decent outline. And then after we met our publisher, we worked with her, and she said, well, you need to tell me more about this, or don't tell me so much about that. And, the typical kind of editing revision suggestions. It was a good collaborating experience with Bob, and then also with our editor. So that was the Ground Zero book that we did.
And how long after you completed Triumph Over Terror did you start working on ADHD, You've Got My Attention, which, by the way, is a great title.
Thank you.
Very much.
Bob loved that title.
Very much what it is, exactly.
Right.
How long, what was the time span in between?
I think maybe it was a year, 6 months to a year. And it was just because of a random comment that someone made to Bob about, well, how did you do all that? How did you, fireman, paramedic, all those involved training and school and pastor, ordination, how did you do all that? And so he called me up that night after that conversation and said, oh, we had this conversation today, and it was the police chief, actually, who said his son was ADHD, and he just wanted to know how Bob had accomplished so much having ADHD. So Bob just started, I did this and I did that and blah, blah, blah. I said, Bob, that's your next book. Everybody wants to know, how do people with ADHD cope? And how do they meet life challenges? And how do they get over the difficulties they have?
And you have a background in helping individuals with...
Right. My background is all in education, actually. I worked with children with special needs of all types over the years. I started when my first teaching job was teaching children with mentally retarded children. That's what it was then called. Now they don't call it that. That's an old-fashioned term. Then I worked with children with learning disabilities. Now they call it learning difficulties. And I also worked with children in a drug and alcohol rehab program as the education side. So I've got a lot of experience with emotional and behavior problems, learning problems, and all of that. So I kind of recognized that Bob was having some difficulty when we worked on the first book. He would read to us once in a while in our critique group, because we kept going back to the critique group to talk about some of these stories and get their input. He'd read, but then he'd falter. And so I thought at first he had some difficulty with vision, because he said, I need new glasses. But then I realized after a while, based on his writing and based on his reading, that he had some learning difficulties, which, he overcome enough to get his degrees, with adaptations. He needed the adaptations to help him get through the program.
Learning your own accommodations, learning your own, I can't think of the word, learning your own limitations.
Right. And your own abilities and how you can get around them.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And he learned that he could use programmed learning. He needed independent learning. He needed one-to-one instruction. So tutoring helped him a lot, like when he had difficulty with algebra and couldn't get it in a group setting, one-to-one tutoring, because it's eyeball to eyeball. You can't mess around if your tutor is sitting right with you. And and he knew he had to learn algebra because he needed it for paramedic school.
Well, that is all so interesting. I want to know how people can get in touch with you.
Okay. I'm on Twitter at Janice Heck, and I'm on Facebook, Janice Hall Heck.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you have been able to stop by today.
Thank you. I've been happy to be here.
Now, we are going to switch to our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay.
Do you have a favorite soda?
Diet Coke is my drink.
Your go-to.
Go-to.
All right.
I brought 2 with me.
Don't leave home without it.
Yeah, sometimes vending machines don't have it, so I have to be prepared.
That's true. Do you carry a notebook with you?
No, I don't.
Do you have any stickers on your refrigerator?
I do. I have cats purr, they don't hiss, or something like that.
Well, very nice, very nice. Janice, again, once again, thank you for stopping by. This has been another episode of the Florida Writer Podcast. Allison out.
Janice Heck is the co-author of Triumph Over Terror and ADHD, You've Got My Attention, with author Bob Osler. She is a retired educator. In her free time, she writes for, edits, and publishes a community newsletter, signs in the Margate Community Church Choir, collects old grammar books just for the heck of it. She loves to travel, photography, cat, writing, blogging challenges, and lifelong learning. Connect with Janice at Twitter at Janice Heck or Janice Hall Heck on Facebook. This has been another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast, brought to you by the Florida Writers Association. For more information on the Florida Writers Association, visit us on the web at floridawriters.net.